This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 11. Ginger's Ranch. As they followed a path down the blue grass hillside, the first house they met the view of the travelers was joyously recognized by the Scarecrow Bear as the one inhabited by his friend Ginger, so they increased their speed and hurried toward it. On reaching the place, however, they found the house deserted. The front door stood open, but no one was inside. In the garden surrounding the house were neat rows of bushes bearing cream puffs and macaroons, some of which were still green, but others ripe and ready to eat. Farther back were fields of caramel, and all the land seemed well cultivated and carefully tended. They looked through the fields for the girl farmer, but she was nowhere to be seen. "Well," finally remarked the little brown bear, "let us go into the house and make ourselves at home. That will be sure to please my friend Ginger, who happens to be away from home just now. When she returns, she will be greatly surprised." "Would she care if I ate some of those ripe cream puffs?" asked the Green Monkey. "No, indeed. Ginger is very generous. Help yourself to all you want," said the Scarecrow Bear. So Woot gathered a lot of cream puffs that were golden yellow and filled with the sweet, creamy substance, and ate until his hunger was satisfied. Then he entered the house with his friends and sat in a rocking chair, just as he was accustomed to do when a boy. The Canary perched herself upon the mantel and daintily plumed her feathers. The Tin Owl sat on the back of another chair. The Scarecrow squatted on his hairy haunches in the middle of the room. "I believe I remember the girl Ginger," remarked the Canary in her sweet voice. "She cannot help us very much, except to direct us on our way to Glinda's castle, for she does not understand magic. But she's a good girl, honest and sensible, and I'll be glad to see her." "All our troubles," said the Owl with a deep sigh, "arose from my foolish resolve to seek Nimmie Amee and make her Empress of the Winkies, and while I wish to reproach no one, I must say that it was Woot the Wanderer who put the notion into my head." "Well, for my part, I'm glad he did," responded the Canary. "Your journey resulted in saving me from the Giantess, and had you not traveled to the Yoop Valley, I would still be Mrs. Yoop's prisoner. It is much nicer to be free, even though I still bear the enchanted form of a canary bird." "Do you think we shall ever be able to get our proper forms back again?" asked the Green Monkey earnestly. Polychrome did not make reply at once to this important question, but after a period of thoughtfulness she said, "I have been taught to believe that there is an antidote for every magic charm, yet Mrs. Yoop insists that no power can alter her transformations. I realize that my own fairy magic cannot do it, although I have thought that we sky fairies have more power than is accorded to earth fairies. The Yookoohoo magic is admitted to be very strange in its workings and different from the magic usually practiced, but perhaps Glinda or Ozma may understand it better than I. In them lies our only hope. Unless they can help us, we must remain forever as we are." "A canary bird on a rainbow wouldn't be so bad," asserted the Tin Owl, winking and blinking with his round tin eyes. "So if you can manage to find your rainbow again, you need have little to worry about." "That's nonsense, Friend Chopper!" exclaimed Woot. "I know just how Polychrome feels. A beautiful girl is much superior to a yellow bird. and a boy, such as I was, far better than a green monkey. Neither of us can be happy again unless we recover our rightful forms." "I feel the same way," announced the stuffed bear. "What do you suppose my friend the Patchwork Girl would think of me if she saw me wearing this beastly shape?" "She'd laugh till she cried," admitted the Tin Owl. "For my part, I'll have to give up the notion of marrying Nimmie Amee, but I'll try not to let that make me unhappy. If it's my duty, I'd like to do my duty, but if magic prevents me getting married, I'll flutter along all by myself and be just as contented." Their serious misfortunes made them all silent for a time, and as their thoughts were busy in dwelling upon the evils with which fate had burdened them, none noticed that Jinjur had suddenly appeared in the doorway and was looking at them in astonishment. The next moment her astonishment changed to anger, for there in her best rocking chair sat a green monkey. A great shiny owl perched upon another chair, and a brown bear squatted upon her parlor rug. Jinjur did not notice the Canary, but she caught up the broomstick and dashed into the room, shouting as she came: "Get out of here, you wild creatures! How dare you enter my house?" With a blow of her broom she knocked the Brown Bear over, and the Tin Owl tried to fly out of her reach and made a great clatter with his tin wings. The Green Monkey was so startled by the sudden attack that he sprung into the fireplace, where there was fortunately no fire, and tried to escape by climbing up the chimney, but he found the opening too small and so was forced to drop down again. Then he crouched trembling in the fireplace, his pretty green hair all blackened with soot and covered with ashes. From this position Woot watched to see what would happen next. "Stop, Jinjur, stop!" cried the Brown Bear, when the broom again threatened him. "Don't you know me? I'm your old friend, the Scarecrow." "You're trying to deceive me, you naughty beast! I can see plainly that you are a bear, and a mighty poor specimen of a bear, too," retorted the girl. "That's because I'm not properly stuffed," he assured her. "When Mrs. Yoop transformed me, she didn't realize I should have more stuffing." "Who is Mrs. Yoop?" inquired Jinjur, pausing with the broom still upraised. "A giantess in the Gillikin country." "Oh, I begin to understand. And Mrs. Yoop transformed you? You are really the famous Scarecrow of Oz?" "I was, Jinjur. Just now I'm as you see me, a miserable little brown bear with a poor quality of stuffing. That Tin Owl is none other than our dear Tin Woodman, Nick Chopper, the Emperor of the Winkies, while this Green Monkey is a nice boy we recently became acquainted with, Woot the Wanderer." "And I," said the Canary, flying close to Jinjur, "am Polychrome, the Daughter of the Rainbow, in the form of a bird." "Goodness me!" cried Jinjur, amazed. "That giantess must be a powerful sorceress, and as wicked as she is powerful." "She's a Yookahoo," said Polychrome. "Fortunately, we managed to escape from her castle, and are now on our way to Glinda the Good to see if she possesses the power to restore us to our proper forms." "Then I must beg your pardons; all of you must forgive me," said Jinjur, putting away the broom. "I took you to be a lot of wild, unmannerly animals, as was quite natural. You are very welcome to my home, and I'm sorry I haven't the power to help you out of your troubles. Please use my house and all that I have as if it were your own." At this declaration of peace the Bear got up on his feet, and the Owl resumed his perch upon the chair, and the Monkey crept out of the fireplace. Jinjur looked at Woot critically and scowled. "For a green monkey," said she, "you're the blackest creature I ever saw, and you'll get my nice clean room all dirty with soot and ashes. Whatever possessed you to jump up the chimney?" I was scared," explained Woot, somewhat ashamed. "Well, you need renovating, and that's what will happen to you right away. Come with me," she commanded. "What are you going to do?" asked Woot. "Give you a good scrubbing," said Jinjur. Now, neither boys nor monkeys relish being scrubbed, so Woot shrank away from the energetic girl, trembling fearfully. But Jinjur grabbed him by his paw and dragged him out to the back yard, where, in spite of his whines and struggles, she plunged him into a tub of cold water and began to scrub him with a stiff brush and a cake of yellow soap. This was the hardest trial that Woot had endured since he had become a monkey, but no protest had any influence with Jinjur, who lathered and scrubbed him in a businesslike manner and afterward dried him with a coarse towel. The Bear and the Owl gravely watched this operation, and nodded approval when Woot's silky green fur shone clear and bright in the afternoon sun. The Canary seemed much amused, and laughed a silvery ripple of laughter as she said, "Very well done, my good Jinjur. I admire your energy and judgment, but I had no idea a monkey could look so comical as this monkey did while he was being bathed." "I'm not a monkey," declared Woot resentfully. "I'm just a boy in a monkey's shape, that's all." "If you can explain to me the difference," said Jinjur, "I'll agree not to wash you again. That is, unless you foolishly get into the fireplace. All persons are usually judged by the shapes in which they appear to the eyes of others. Look at me, Woot. What am I?" Woot looked at her. "You're as pretty a girl as I've ever seen," he replied. Jinjur frowned. That is, she tried hard to frown. "Come out into the garden with me," she said, "and I'll give you some of the most delicious caramels you ever ate. They're a new variety that no one can grow but me, and they have a heliotrope flavor."
End of chapter 11.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 12. Ozma and Dorothy. In her magnificent palace in the Emerald City, the beautiful girl ruler of all the wonderful Land of Oz sat in her dainty boudoir with her friend Princess Dorothy beside her. Ozma was studying a roll of manuscript which she had taken from the royal library, while Dorothy worked at her embroidery and at times stopped to pat a shaggy little dog that lay at her feet. The little dog's name was Toto, and he was Dorothy's faithful companion. To judge Ozma of Oz by standards of our world, you would think her very young, perhaps 14 or 15 years of age. Yet for years she had ruled the Land of Oz and never seemed a bit older. Dorothy appeared much younger than Ozma. She had been a little girl when first she came to the Land of Oz, and she was a little girl still, and would never seem to be a day older while she lived in this wonderful fairyland. Oz was not always a fairyland, I am told, but once it was much like other lands, except it was shut in by a dreadful desert of sandy wastes that lay all around it, thus preventing its people from all contact with the rest of the world. Seeing this isolation, the fairy band of Queen Lurline, passing over Oz while on a journey, enchanted the country and so made it a fairyland. And Queen Lurline left one of her fairies to rule this enchanted Land of Oz, and then passed on and forgot all about it. From that moment no one in Oz ever died. Those who were old remained old, Those who were young and strong did not change as years passed them by. The children remained children always, and played and romped to their hearts' content, while all the babies lived in their cradles and were tenderly cared for and never grew up. So people in Oz stopped counting how old they were in years, for years made no difference in their appearance and could not alter their station. They did not get sick, so there were no doctors among them. Accidents might happen to some on rare occasions, it is true, and while no one could die naturally, as other people do, it was possible that one might be totally destroyed. Such incidents, however, were very unusual, and so seldom was there anything to worry over that the Oz people were as happy and contented as can be. Another strange thing about this fairyland of Oz was that whoever managed to enter it from the outside world came under the magic spell of the place and did not change in appearance as long as they lived there. So Dorothy, who now lived with Ozma, seemed just the same sweet little girl as she had been when first she came to this delightful fairyland. Perhaps all parts of Oz might not be called truly delightful, but it was surely delightful in the neighborhood of the Emerald City, where Ozma reigned. Her loving influence was felt for many miles around, but there were places in the mountains of the Gillikin country and forests of the Quadling country, and perhaps in faraway parts of the Munchkin and Winkie countries, where the inhabitants were somewhat rude and uncivilized and had not yet come under the spell of Ozma's wise and kindly rule. Also, when Oz first became a fairyland, it harbored several witches and magicians and sorcerers and necromancers, who were scattered in various parts, but most of these had been deprived of their magic powers, and Ozma had issued a royal edict forbidding anyone in her dominions to work magic except Glinda the Good and the Wizard of Oz. Ozma herself, being a real fairy, knew a lot of magic, but she only used it to benefit her subjects. This little explanation will help you to understand better the story you are reading, but most of it is already known to those who are familiar with the Oz people whose adventures they have followed in other Oz books. Ozma and Dorothy were fast friends and were much together. Everyone in Oz loved Dorothy almost as well as they did their lovely ruler, for the little Kansas girl's good fortune had not spoiled her or rendered her at all vain. She was just the same brave and true and adventurous child as before she lived in a royal palace and became the chum of the fairy Ozma. In the room in which the two sat, which was one of Ozma's private suite of apartments, hung the famous magic picture. This was the source of constant interest to little Dorothy. One had to but stand before it and wish to see what any person was doing, and at once a scene would flash upon the magic canvas which showed exactly where that person was, and like our own moving pictures, would reproduce the actions of that person as long as you cared to watch them. So today, when Dorothy tired of her embroidery, she drew the curtains from before the magic picture and wished to see what her friend Button-Bright was doing. Button-Bright, she saw, was playing ball with Ojo, the Munchkin boy, so Dorothy next wished to see what her Aunt Em was doing. The picture showed Aunt Em quietly engaged in darning socks for Uncle Henry, so Dorothy wished to see what her old friend the Tin Woodman was doing. The Tin Woodman was then just leaving his tin castle, in the company of the Scarecrow and Woot the Wanderer. Dorothy had never seen this boy before, so she wondered who he was. Although she was curious to know where the three were going, for she noticed Woot's knapsack and guessed that they had started on a long journey, she asked Ozma about it, but Ozma did not know. That afternoon Dorothy again saw the travelers in the Magic Picture, but they were merely tramping through the country, and Dorothy was not much interested in them. A couple of days later, however, the girl, being again with Ozma, wished to see her friends, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, in the Magic Picture, and on this occasion found them in the great castle of Mrs. Yoop, the Giantess, who was at the time about to transform them. Both Dorothy and Ozma now became greatly interested and watched the transformations with indignation and horror. "What a wicked Giantess!" exclaimed Dorothy. "Yes," answered Ozma, "she must be punished for this cruelty to our friends, and to the poor boy who is with them." After this they followed the adventure of the little Brown Bear and the Tin Owl and the Green Monkey with breathless interest, and they were delighted when they escaped from Mrs. Yoop. They did not know then who the Canary was, but realized it must be the transformation of some person of consequence whom the Giantess had also enchanted. When finally the day came when the adventurers headed south into the Munchkin country, Dorothy asked anxiously, "Can't something be done for them, Ozma? Can't you change 'em back into their own shapes? They've suffered enough from these dreadful transformations, seems to me." "I've been studying ways to help them ever since they were transformed," replied Ozma. "Mrs. Yoop is now the only yookoohoo in my dominions, and the yookoohoo magic is very peculiar and hard for others to understand, yet I am resolved to make the attempt to break these enchantments. I may not succeed, but I shall do the best I can. From the directions our friends are taking, I believe they are going to pass by Jinjur's ranch, so if we start now, we may meet them there. Would you like to go with me, Dorothy?" "Of course," answered the little girl. "I wouldn't miss it for anything." "Then order the Red Wagon," said Ozma of Oz, "and we will start at once." Dorothy ran to do as she was bid, while Ozma went to her magic room to make ready the things she believed she would need. In half an hour the Red Wagon stood before the grand entrance of the palace, and before it was hitched the wooden Sawhorse, which was Ozma's favorite steed. This Sawhorse, while made of wood, was very much alive, and could travel swiftly and without tiring. To keep the ends of his wooden legs from wearing down short, Ozma had shod the Sawhorse with plates of pure gold. His harness was studded with brilliant emeralds and other jewels, and so, while he himself was not at all handsome, his outfit made a splendid appearance. Since the Sawhorse could understand her spoken words, Ozma used no reins to guide him. She merely told him where to go. When she came from the palace with Dorothy, they both climbed into the Red Wagon, and then the little dog Toto ran up ahead and asked, "Are you going to leave me behind, Dorothy?" Dorothy looked at Ozma, who smiled in return and said, "Toto may go with us, if you wish him to." So Dorothy lifted the little dog into the wagon, for while he could run fast, he could not keep up with the speed of the wonderful Sawhorse. Away they went, over hills and through meadows, covering the ground with astonishing speed. It is not surprising, therefore, that the Red Wagon arrived before Jinjur's house just as that energetic young lady had finished scrubbing the Green Monkey and was about to lead him to the caramel patch.
End of Chapter 12.
Recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 13. The Restoration. The Tin Owl gave a hoot of delight when he saw the Red Wagon draw up before Ginger's house, and the Brown Bear grunted and growled with glee and trotted toward Ozma as fast as he could wobble. As for the Canary, it flew swiftly to Dorothy's shoulder and perched there, saying in her ear, "Thank goodness you have come to our rescue." "But who are you?" asked Dorothy. "Don't you know?" returned the Canary. "No. For the first time we noticed you in the Magic Picture you were just a bird, as you are now, but we've guessed that the Giant Woman had transformed you as she did the others." "Yes, I'm Polychrome, the Rainbow's Daughter," announced the Canary. "Goodness me!" cried Dorothy. "How dreadful!" "Well, I make a rather pretty bird, I think," returned Polychrome, "but of course I'm anxious to resume my own shape and get back upon my rainbow." "Ozma will help you, I'm sure," said Dorothy. "How does it feel, Scarecrow, to be a bear?" she asked, addressing her old friend. "I don't like it," declared the Scarecrow Bear. "This brutal form is quite beneath the dignity of a wholesome straw man." "And think of me," said the Owl, perching upon the dashboard of the Red Wagon with much noisy clattering of his tin feathers. "Don't I look horrid, Dorothy, with eyes several sizes too big for my body and so weak that I ought to wear spectacles?" "Well," said Dorothy critically, as she looked him over, "you're nothing to brag of, I must confess, but Ozma will soon fix you up again." The Green Monkey had hung back, bashful at meeting two lovely girls while in the form of a beast, but Ginger now took his hand and led him forward while she introduced him to Ozma, and Woot managed to make a low bow, not really ungraceful for Her Girlish Majesty, the Ruler of Oz. "You have all been forced to endure a sad experience," said Ozma, "and so I am anxious to do all in my power to break Mrs. Yoop's enchantments. But first tell me how you happened to stray into that lonely valley where Yoop Castle stands." Between them they related the object of their journey, the Scarecrow Bear telling of the Tin Woodman's resolve to find Nimmie Amee and marry her, and as a just reward for her loyalty to him. Woot told of their adventures with the Loons of Loonville, and the Tin Owl described the manner in which they had been captured and transformed by the Giantess. Then Polychrome related her story, and when all had been told, and Dorothy had several times reproved Toto for growling at the Tin Owl, Ozma remained thoughtful for a while, pondering upon what she had heard. Finally she looked up and with one of her delightful smiles said to the anxious group, "I am not sure my magic will be able to restore every one of you, because your transformations are of such a strange and unusual character. Indeed, Mrs. Yoop was quite justified in believing no power could alter her enchantments. However, I am sure I can restore the Scarecrow to his original shape. He was stuffed with straw from the beginning, and even the Yookoohoo magic could not alter that. The Giantess was merely able to make a bear's shape of a man's shape, but the bear is stuffed with straw just as the man was, so I feel confident I can make a man of the bear again." "Hurrah!" cried the Brown Bear, and tried clumsily to dance a jig of delight. "As for the Tin Woodman, his case is much the same," resumed Ozma, still smiling. "The power of the Giantess could not make him anything but a tin creature, whatever shape she transformed him into, so it will not be impossible to restore him to his manly form. However, I shall test my magic at once, and see if it will do what I have promised." She drew from her bosom a small silver wand, and making passes from the wand over the head of the bear, she succeeded in the brief space of a moment in breaking his enchantment. The original Scarecrow of Oz again stood before them, well stuffed with straw and with his features nicely painted upon the bag which formed his head. The Scarecrow was greatly delighted, as you may suppose, and he strutted proudly around while the powerful fairy, Ozma of Oz, broke the enchantment that had transformed the Tin Woodman and made a Tin Owl into a Tin Man again. "Now then," chirped the Canary eagerly, "I'm next, Ozma." "But your case is different," replied Ozma, no longer smiling but wearing a grave expression on her sweet face. "I shall have to experiment on you, Polychrome, and I may fail in all my attempts." She then tried 2 or 3 different methods of magic, hoping one of them would succeed in breaking Polychrome's enchantment, but still the Rainbow's Daughter remained a canary bird. Finally, however, she experimented in another way. She transformed the canary into a dove, then transformed the dove into a speckled hen, then changed the speckled hen into a rabbit, and then the rabbit into a fawn. And at the last, after mixing several powders and sprinkling them upon the fawn, the Yookoohoo enchantment was suddenly broken, and before them stood one of the daintiest and loveliest creatures in any fairyland in the world. Polychrome was as sweet and merry in disposition as she was beautiful, and when she danced and capered around in delight, her beautiful hair floated around her like a golden mist, and her many-hued raiment, as soft as cobwebs, reminded one of drifting clouds in a summer sky. Woot was so awed by the entrancing sight of this exquisite Sky Fairy that he quite forgot his own sad plight until he noticed Ozma gazing upon him with an intent expression that denoted sympathy and sorrow. Dorothy whispered in her friend's ear, but the Ruler of Oz shook her head sadly. Ginger, noticing this and understanding Ozma's looks, took the paw of the Green Monkey in her own hand and patted it softly. "Never mind," she said to him. "You are a very beautiful color, and a monkey can climb better than a boy and do a lot of other things no boy can ever do." "What's the matter?" asked Woot, a sinking feeling at his heart. "Is Ozma's magic all used up?" Ozma herself answered him. "Your form of enchantment, my poor boy," she said pityingly, "is different from that of the others. Indeed, it is a form that is impossible to alter by any magic known to fairies or Yookoohoos. The wicked Giantess was well aware when she gave you the form of a green monkey that the green monkey must exist in the Land of Oz for all future time." Woot drew a long sigh. "Well, that's pretty hard luck," he said bravely, "but if it can't be helped I must endure it, that's all. I don't like being a monkey, but what's the use of kicking against my fate?" They were all very sorry for him, and Dorothy anxiously asked Ozma, "Couldn't Glinda save him?" "No," was the reply. "Glinda's power in transformations is no greater than my own. Before I left my palace I went to my magic room and studied Woot's case very carefully. I found that no power can do away with the Green Monkey. He might transfer or exchange his form with some other person, it is true, but the Green Monkey we cannot get rid of by any magic arts known to science." "But see here," said the Scarecrow, who had listened intently to this explanation, "why not put the monkey's form on someone else?" "Who would agree to make the change?" said Ozma. "If by force we caused anyone else to become a green monkey, we would be as cruel and as wicked as Mrs. Yoop. And what good would an exchange do?" she continued. "Suppose, for instance, we worked the enchantment and made Toto into a green monkey. At the same moment Woot would become a little dog." "Leave me out of your magic, please," said Toto, with a reproachful growl. "I wouldn't become a green monkey for anything." "And I wouldn't become a dog," said Woot. "A green monkey is much better than a dog, it seems to me." "That is only a matter of opinion," answered Toto. "Now here's another idea," said the Scarecrow. "My brains are working finely today, you must admit. Why not transform Toto into Woot the Wanderer, and then have them exchange forms? The dog would become a green monkey, and the monkey would have his own natural shape again." "To be sure," said Jinjur; "that's a fine idea." "Leave me out of it," said Toto. "I won't do it." "Wouldn't you be willing to become a green monkey? See what a pretty color it is, so that this poor boy could be restored to his own shape?" asked Jinjur pleadingly. "No," said Toto. "I don't like that plan the least bit," declared Dorothy, "for then I wouldn't have any little dog." "But you'd have a green monkey in his place," persisted Jinjur, who liked Woot and wanted to help him. "I don't want a green monkey," said Dorothy positively. "Don't speak of this again, I beg of you," said Woot. "This is my own misfortune, and I would rather suffer it alone than deprive Princess Dorothy of her dog, or deprive the dog of his proper shape. And perhaps even Her Majesty Ozma of Oz might not be able to transform anyone else into the shape of Woot the Wanderer." "Yes, I believe I might do that," Ozma returned. "But Woot is quite right. We are not justified in inflicting upon anyone, man or dog, the form of a green monkey. Also, it is certain that in order to relieve the boy of the form he now wears, we must give it to somebody else, who would be forced to wear it always." "I wonder," said Dorothy thoughtfully, "if we couldn't find someone in the Land of Oz who would be willing to become a green monkey. Seems to me a monkey is active and spry. He can climb trees and do a lot of clever things. And green isn't a bad color for a monkey. Makes him unusual." "I wouldn't ask anyone to take this dreadful form," said Woot. "It wouldn't be right, you know. I've been a monkey for some time now, and I don't like it. Makes me ashamed to be a beast of this sort when by right of birth I'm a boy. So I'm sure it would be wicked to ask anyone else to take my place." They were all silent, for they knew he spoke the truth. Dorothy was almost ready to cry with pity, and Ozma's sweet face was sad and disturbed. The Scarecrow rubbed and patted his stuffed head to try and make it think better, while the Tin Woodman went into the house and began to oil his tin joints so that the sorrow of his friends might not cause him to weep. Weeping is liable to rust tin, and the Emperor prided himself upon his highly polished body, now doubly dear to him because for a time he had been deprived of it. Polychrome had danced down the garden paths and back again a dozen times, for she was seldom still a moment. Yet she had heard Ozma's speech and understood very well Woot's unfortunate position. But the Rainbow's Daughter, even while dancing, could think and reason very clearly, and suddenly she solved the problem in the nicest possible way. Coming close to Ozma, she said: "Your Majesty, all this trouble was caused by the wickedness of Mrs. Yoop the Giantess. Yet even now that cruel woman is living in her secluded castle, enjoying the thought that she has put this terrible enchantment on Woot the Wanderer. Even now she is laughing at our despair because we can find no way to get rid of the Green Monkey. Very well, we do not wish to get rid of it. Let the woman who created the form wear it herself, as a just punishment for her wickedness. I am sure your fairy power can give it to Mrs. Yoop the form of Woot the Wanderer, even at this distance from her, and then it will be possible to exchange the two forms. Mrs. Yoop will become the Green Monkey, and Woot will recover his own form again." Ozma's face brightened as she listened to this clever proposal. "Thank you, Polychrome," said she. "The task you propose is not so easy as you may suppose, but I will make the attempt, and perhaps I may succeed."
End of chapter 13.
Recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 14. The Green Monkey. They now entered the house, and as an interested group, watched Ginger, at Ozma's command, build a fire and put a kettle of water over to boil. The ruler of Oz stood before the fire silent and grave, while the others, realizing that an important ceremony of magic was about to be performed, stood quietly in the background so as not to interrupt Ozma's proceedings. Only Polychrome kept going in and going out, humming softly to herself as she danced, for the Rainbow's Daughter could not keep still for long, and the four walls of her room always made her nervous and ill at ease. She moved so noiselessly, however, that her movements were like the shifting sunbeams and did not annoy anyone. When the water in the kettle bubbled, Ozma drew from her bosom 2 tiny packets containing powders. These powders she threw into the kettle, and after briskly stirring the contents with the branch of a macaroon bush, Ozma poured the mystic broth upon a broad platter which Ginger had placed upon the table. As the broth cooled, it became as silver, reflecting all objects from its smooth surface like a mirror. While her companions gathered around the table, eagerly attentive, and Dorothy even held little Toto in her arms that he might see, Ozma waved her wand over the mirror-like surface. At once it reflected the interior of Yoop Castle, and in the big hall sat Mrs. Yoop, in her best embroidered silken robes, engaged in weaving a new lace apron to replace the old one she had lost. The Giantess seemed rather uneasy, as if she had a faint idea that someone was spying upon her, for she kept looking behind her and this way and that, as though expecting danger from an unknown source. Perhaps some Yookoohoo instinct warned her. Woot saw that she had escaped from her room by some of the magical means at her disposal, after her prisoners had escaped her. She was now occupying the big hall of her castle as she used to do. Also, Woot thought, from the cruel expression on the face of the Giantess, that she was planning revenge on them as soon as her new magic apron was finished. But Ozma was now making passes over the platter with her silver wand, and presently the form of the Giantess began to shrink in size and to change its shape. And now in her place sat the form of Woot the Wanderer, and as if suddenly realizing her transformation, Mrs. Yoop threw down her work and rushed to a looking-glass that stood against the wall of her room. When she saw the boy's form reflected as her own, she grew violently angry and dashed her head against the mirror, smashing to atoms. Just then Ozma was busy with her magic wand, making strange figures, and she had also placed her left hand firmly upon the shoulder of the Green Monkey. So now, as all eyes were turned upon the platter, the form of Mrs. Yoop gradually changed again. She was slowly transformed into the Green Monkey, and at the same time Woot slowly regained his natural form. It was quite a surprise to them all when they raised their eyes from the platter and saw Woot the Wanderer standing beside Ozma. And when they glanced at the platter again, it reflected nothing more than the walls of the room in Ginger's house in which they stood. The magic ceremonial was ended, and Ozma of Oz had triumphed over the wicked giantess. "What will become of her, I wonder?" said Dorothy as she drew a long breath. "She will always remain a green monkey," replied Ozma, "and in that form she will be unable to perform any magical arts whatsoever. She need not be unhappy, however, and as she lives all alone in her castle, she probably won't mind the transformation very much after she gets used to it." "Anyway, it serves her right," declared Dorothy, and all agreed with her. "But," said the kind-hearted Tin Woodman, "I'm afraid the Green Monkey will starve, for Mrs. Yoop used to get her food by magic, and now that magic is taken away from her, what can she eat?" "Why, she'll do what other monkeys do," returned the Scarecrow. "Even in the form of a green monkey, she's a very clever person, and I'm sure her wits will show her how to get plenty to eat." "Don't worry about her," advised Dorothy. "She didn't worry about you, and her condition is no worse than the condition she imposed upon poor Woot. She can't starve to death in the Land of Oz, that's certain, and if she gets hungry at times, it's no more than the wicked thing deserves. Let's forget Mrs. Yoop, for in spite of her being a yookoohoo, our fairy friends have broken all of her transformations.
End of chapter 14.
LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Luke Nelson. The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum. Chapter 15. The Man of Tin. Ozma and Dorothy were quite pleased with Woot the Wanderer, whom they found modest and intelligent and very well mannered. The boy was truly grateful for his release from the cruel enchantment, and he promised to love, revere, and defend the girl ruler of Oz forever afterward as a faithful subject. "You may visit me at my palace if you wish," said Ozma, "where I will be glad to introduce you to two other nice boys, Ojo the Munchkin and Button Bright." "Thank your Majesty," replied Woot, and then he turned to the Tin Woodman and inquired, "What are your further plans, Mr. Emperor? Will you still seek Nimmie Amee and marry her, or will you abandon the quest and return to the Emerald City and your own castle?" The Tin Woodman, now as highly polished and well oiled as ever, reflected a while on this question and then answered, "Well, I see no reason why I should not find Nimmie Amee. We are now in the Munchkin country, where we are perfectly safe, and if it was right for me, before our enchantment, to marry Nimmie Amee and make her Empress of the Winkies, it must be right now, when the enchantment has been broken and I am once more myself. Am I correct, friend Scarecrow?" "You are indeed," answered the Scarecrow. "No one can oppose such logic." "But I'm afraid you don't love Nimmie Amee," suggested Dorothy. "That is just because I can't love anyone," replied the Tin Woodman. "But if I cannot love my wife, I can at least be kind to her, and all husbands are not able to do that." "Do you suppose Nimmie Amee still loves you, after all these years?" asked Dorothy. "I'm quite sure of it, and that is why I am going to make her happy. Woot the Wanderer thinks I ought to reward her for being faithful to me after my meat body was chopped to pieces and I became tin. What do you think, Ozma?" Ozma smiled and said, I do not know your Nimmie Amee, and so I cannot tell what she needs to make her happy. But there is no harm in your going to her and asking her if she still wishes to marry you. If she does, we will give you a grand wedding at the Emerald City, and afterward as Empress of the Winkies. Nimmie Amee would become one of the most important ladies in all Oz." So it was decided that the Tin Woodman would continue his journey, and that the Scarecrow and Woot the Wanderer should accompany him as before. Polychrome also decided to join their party, somewhat to the surprise of all. "I hate to be cooped up in a palace," she said to Ozma, "and of course the first time I meet my Rainbow I shall return to my own dear home in the skies, where my fairy sisters are even now awaiting me, and my father is cross because I get lost so often. But I can find my Rainbow just as quickly while traveling in the Munchkin country as I could if living in the Emerald City, or any other place in Oz. So I shall go with the Tin Woodman and help him woo Nimmie Amee." Dorothy wanted to go too, but as the Tin Woodman did not invite her to join his party, she felt she might be intruding if she asked to be taken. She hinted, but she found he didn't take the hint. It is quite a delicate matter for one to ask a girl to marry him, however much she loves him, and perhaps the Tin Woodman did not desire to have too many looking on when he found his old sweetheart, Nimmie Amee. So Dorothy contented herself with the thought that she would help Ozma prepare a splendid wedding feast, to be followed by a round of parties and festivities when the Emperor of the Winkies reached the Emerald City with his bride. Ozma offered to take them all in the Red Wagon to a place as near to the great Munchkin forest as a wagon could get. The Red Wagon was big enough to seat them all, and so, bidding good-bye to Jinjur, who gave Woot a basket of ripe cream puffs and caramels to take with him, Ozma commanded the wooden Sawhorse to start, and the strange creature moved swiftly over the lanes and presently came to the road of yellow bricks. This road led straight to a dense forest, where the path was too narrow for the Red Wagon to proceed farther, so here the party separated. Ozma and Dorothy and Toto returned to the Emerald City, after wishing their friends a safe and successful journey, while the Tin Woodman, the Scarecrow, Woot the Wanderer and Polychrome, the Rainbow's Daughter, prepared to push their way through the thick forest. However, those forest paths were well known to the Tin Woodman and the Scarecrow, who felt quite at home among the trees. "I was born in this grand forest," said Nick Chopper, the Tin Emperor, speaking proudly, "and it was here that the Witch enchanted my axe and I lost different parts of my meat body until I became all tin. Here also, for it is a big forest, Nimmie Amee lived with the Wicked Witch, and at the other edge of the trees stands the cottage of my friend Ku Klip, the famous tinsmith who made my present beautiful form." "He must be a clever workman," declared Woot admiringly. "He is simply wonderful," declared the Tin Woodman. "I shall be glad to make his acquaintance," said Woot. "If you wish to meet with real cleverness," remarked the Scarecrow, "you should visit the Munchkin farmer who first made me. I won't say that my friend the Emperor isn't all right for a tin man, but any judge of beauty can understand that a Scarecrow is far more artistic and refined." "You are too soft and flimsy," said the Tin Woodman. "You are too hard and stiff," said the Scarecrow, and this was as near to quarreling as the two friends ever came. Polychrome laughed at them both, as well as she might, and Woot hastened to change the subject. At night they all camped under the trees. The boy ate cream puffs for supper and offered Polychrome some, but she preferred other food, and at daybreak she slipped the dew that was clustered thick on the forest flowers. Then they tramped onward again, and presently the Scarecrow paused and said: "It was on this very spot that Dorothy and I first met the Tin Woodman, who was rusted so badly that none of his joints would move. But after we had oiled him up he was as good as new, and accompanied us to the Emerald City." "Ah, that was a sad experience," asserted the Tin Woodman soberly. "I was caught in a rainstorm while chopping down a tree for exercise, and before I realized it I was firmly rusted in every joint. There I stood, axe in hand, but unable to move, for days and weeks and months. Indeed, I have never known exactly how long the time was, but finally along came Dorothy and I was saved. See, this is the very tree I was chopping at the time I rusted." "You cannot be far from your old house, in that case," said Woot. "No, my little cabin stands not a great way off, but there is no occasion for us to visit it. Our errand is with Nimmie Amee, and her house is somewhat farther away, to the left of us." "Didn't you say she lives with the Wicked Witch, who makes her a slave?" asked the boy. "She did, but she doesn't," was the reply. "I am told the Witch was destroyed when Dorothy's house fell on her, so now Nimmie Amee must live all alone. I haven't seen her, of course, since the Witch was crushed, for at that time I was standing rusted in the forest and had been there a long time, but the poor girl must have felt very happy to be free from her cruel mistress." "Very well," said the Scarecrow. "Let's travel on and find Nimmie Amee. Lead on, your Majesty, since you know the way, and we will follow." So the Tin Woodman took a path that led through the thickest part of the forest, and they followed it for some time. The light was dim here, because vines and bushes and leafy foliage were all about them, and often the Tin Man had to push aside the branches that obstructed their way, or cut them off with his axe. After they had proceeded some distance, the Emperor suddenly stopped short and exclaimed: "Good gracious!" The Scarecrow, who was next, first bumped into his friend, then peered around his tin body, and said in a tone of wonder: "Well, I declare!" Woot the Wanderer pushed forward to see what was the matter, and cried out in astonishment: "For goodness' sake!" Then the three stood motionless, staring hard, until Polychrome's merry laughter rang out behind them and aroused them from their stupor. In the path before them stood a Tin Man who was the exact duplicate of the Tin Woodman. He was of the same size, he was jointed in the same manner, and he was made of shining tin from top to toe. But he stood immovable, with his tin jaws half parted and his tin eyes turned upward. In one of his hands was held a long, gleaming sword. Yes, there was the difference, the only thing that distinguished him from the Emperor of the Winkies. The Tin Man bore a sword, while the Tin Woodman bore an axe. "It's a dream! It must be a dream!" gasped Woot. "That's it, of course," said the Scarecrow. "There couldn't be two Tin Woodmen." "No," agreed Polychrome, dancing nearer to the stranger. "This one is a Tin Soldier. Don't you see his sword?" The Tin Woodman cautiously put one tin hand and felt of his double arm. Then he said in a voice that trembled with emotion: "Who are you, friend?" There was no reply. "Can't you see he's rusted, just as you were once?" asked Polychrome, laughing again. "Here, Nick Chopper, lend me your oil can a minute." The Tin Woodman silently handed her his oil can, without which he never traveled, and Polychrome first oiled the stranger's tin jaws, and then worked them gently to and fro till the Tin Soldier said: "That's enough, thank you. I can now talk. But please oil my other joints." Woot seized the oil can and did this, but all the others helped wiggle the soldier's joints as soon as they were oiled, until they moved freely. The Tin Soldier seemed highly pleased at his release. He strutted up and down the path, saying in a high, thin voice: "The soldier is a splendid man when marching on parade, and when he meets the enemy he never is afraid. He rights the wrongs of nations, his country's flag defends. The foe he'll fight with great delight, but seldom fights his friends."
End of chapter 15.